It's time to review Zone of the Enders, the second runner, for the PlayStation 2. Okay, it's been about 2 years, so a little recap is in order. Zone of the Enders is an action-packed mecha franchise created by Hideo Kojima of Metal Gear fame that kicked off with Zone of the Enders for the PlayStation 2, which basically acted as a tech demo for the engine that would be used in other PS2 Kojima-developed games, and also, to most people, the free game that came with the demo for the incredibly hyped Metal Gear Solid 2. Due to massive sales, most of which came from the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo, ZOE became a franchise that flourished for a couple of years, getting a couple of anime spin-offs, a strategy game for the GBA, and an eventual sequel in 2004. The second runner is that sequel, and for a long time the game was very obscure, mostly due to comparatively poor sales, meaning the game became ultra rare in parts of Europe. However, this has been remedied with the Zone of the Enders HD Collection, which gathers the first two games together in HD along with the demo of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance for the PS3 and Xbox 360. Back when I reviewed the original Zone of the Enders nearly 2 years ago, I said that it was a fun, if flawed game, and that I would review the second runner when the HD Collection finally came out. So now, has the 2-year wait been worth it? And more importantly, can the second runner improve on the original's problems? Let's find out! The Zone of the Enders series takes place hundreds of years into the future, where humanity has colonized other planets, but unfortunately, this has led to a massive civil war against Earth-born humans and colony-born humans, the latter referred to as Enders as an insulting term. This war is acted about by piloting gigantic mecha known as orbital frames, coming in all sorts of shapes and sizes. In the second runner, you control Dingo Egret, an ice miner who comes across a very special orbital frame known as Jehuti while on Jupiter. Shortly after, a large number of battleships and orbital frames led by an organization named Barum attacks Jupiter and Dingo's friends, so in response he gets into Jehuti and takes off to deal with the frames and battleships. There's more to the story than that, but I'd be going straight into spoiler territory, so I'll leave it at that. Zone of the Enders, the second runner, is a fully three-dimensional mecha fighter where you can fight against other orbital frames of all kinds in the air or on the ground. You go upwards by pressing Y and go downwards by pressing A. You attack enemies by shooting them or punching them up close depending on the range by pressing X, and you can either grab them or use sub-weapons by pressing B. Sub-weapons are extra weapons that are obtained as you progress through the game, and can be equipped by either pressing the left bumper or flicking through them by pressing up or down on the D-pad. The right bumper is used to block enemy attacks. You can dash while moving or use burst attacks while standing still by holding the right trigger, and can lock onto enemies by pressing the left trigger. The point of the game is to complete whatever objective you're given, which can range from destroying a large group of enemies to going to a certain location to fight a boss or get some kind of MacGuffin. When you defeat enemies, they occasionally leave behind a giant floating metal box known as a Metatron that refills your health completely when collected, and can even give you some experience to make you more powerful as the game goes on. The first problem that I had with this game from the get-go is how linear the levels are, at least in comparison to the first game. Whereas the majority of the levels in the original were vast open cityscapes, most of the levels in the second runner were basically differently colored corridors. There are fights in open space every once in a while, but I find it pretty irritating that most of the game's mech fights are confined to a lot of very linear paths, which just makes it sometimes feel like you're going through the same level over and over again. Another issue, though a minor one, is that the frame rate occasionally craps up and makes the game really slow at times. Now keep in mind that this problem seems to be based around the HD Collection version only, and I've got the 360 version which isn't as bad as the PS3. But thankfully there is a patch being made to sort that out. These little frame rate problems may not be in the original game, but it's something that's still worth mentioning. And annoyingly, the music of the game is actually pretty forgettable. Okay, yes, the theme song Beyond the Bounds does kick unbelievable amounts of ass, but aside from that, there really aren't any tracks that stuck in my mind after I finished the game. Which is quite a shame, seeing as the original game had a lot of really good emotional tracks, at least during the story cutscenes. And speaking of which, the story also felt weaker than the originals. It didn't feel as affecting or memorable as the first game was, not to mention the acting was actually worse aside from one or two voices, and a lot of the translated lines just sounded really awkward. Now I know it's a bit strange seeing as the plot was one of the most disliked aspects of the original, but let me give some context. When I played ZOE 1 back in 2011, I hadn't played many games with that great of a plot, but since then I've gained a greater appreciation for gaming stories, for example the Ace Attorney series. So maybe if I played this shortly after I reviewed the first game, maybe my opinion of this game's plot would have been different, I don't know. There are also a number of sections that can become trial and error in trying to figure out what to do, or just to even beat them, and as such can become bloody annoying. Probably the worst section was the gigantic army battle near the game's climax, which was just really irritating to go through since there's so much crap going on and you have to protect your completely useless comrades in addition to fighting off the countless waves of enemy orbital frames. However, even though I had a lot to complain about, the truth is that the second runner is, for the most part, actually better than the original. First of all, the graphics are improved over the original by bringing in a new cel-shaded style that makes the orbital frames stand out more and overall having a more developed look than the basic looking characters and environments of the first game. And like with the original, the mech combat's a lot of fun to play. It's really fluid and easy to control, it's very satisfying to take down tens of enemies within a few seconds, and there's more variety in the fights this time around since some of them require you to use a bit of thinking power on how to defeat them, and you have new techniques and sub-weapons to take them down. There are also a lot more epic set pieces this time around. Not only are the bosses more challenging and unique, but there are several parts that add to the epicness of the game. From going up against a massive mecha army to destroying a load of battleships, and even a section reminiscent of the first game where you have to fight orbital frames in a city while protecting citizens from the damage. The second runner also improves on some of the issues I had with ZOE 1, such as having barely any of that game's terrible signposting issues when trying to complete an objective, or having any kind of filler to try stretch out the already short running time. ZOE 2 is much more focused this time around and does its best to just give you a short but damn fun game without resorting to some kind of nonsense to make it longer. However, probably the best aspect of the game is that it actually feels complete. One of the most disappointing things about the original was how suddenly it ended. Like you only completed the first quarter or half of what could have been a great game if it didn't just suddenly end. This time around, however, it feels like a proper full game, and not just a short tech demo, and as such, the story finally gets a proper conclusion and makes things all the more satisfying. Zone of the Enders, the second runner, is a pretty damn good game with improved graphics, epic set pieces, fluid and varied mecha combat, none of the original's pacing problems, a kick-ass theme song, and an overall complete experience. However, it's let down by a worse plot and voice acting, a few slight frame rate issues exclusive to the HD Collection, forgettable music, and a handful of irritating sections. Despite this, I'd still highly recommend you get the HD Collection for this game alone because it's that good. Not to mention you get the first game as well for a basis of comparison. In conclusion, I give the second runner a rating of damn solid. Pretty damn good game with a few terrible aspects to it. I'm Father Dugan 9000 and I hope you enjoyed this review. Until we meet again, have a great day, y'all!